Everybody's got a story. You just have to listen. I'm Joe Pardavila, and this is Good Listen. And boy, does Joe Kenda have a story. If you're a fan of true crime, you know who Joe Kenda is. He's the star of 2 hit shows on Investigation Discovery after 21 years chasing killers as a detective in Colorado. We're going to talk about his career, why true crime is so popular, and what inspired him to write a new book. Lieutenant Joe Kenda, welcome to Good Listen. How are you, sir?
Well, thank you. And you?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for joining me today. So I want to start with a huge question, and I apologize for coming out guns blazing, pardon the pun, and the idea of true crime. My wife's obsessed with it. America's obsessed with it. As someone who had basically their entire adult life in law enforcement, can you sort of like whittle down like why people are so in love with this genre?
Well, of course. If we are accustomed to the fictional side of violence as perpetrated by Hollywood and whoever, and people begin to believe after a while that the stories are old and tired. They always portray the criminal in a $6,000 suit with a private jet, and he has minions who wear $2,000 suits, and they don't get to come on the jet. They have to take an airline. It's all rather ridiculous. The car chases and exploding things and gun battles and girls wearing sprayed-on dresses with guns bigger than they are. When you watch true crime, you can identify with these people. This is some guy that works at UPS who decided to kill somebody, and the viewer works at UPS. Or it's a woman that works in a grocery store where you shop. Same chain, not the same store. They identify with that, and it becomes very interesting. These are normal, everyday people that you would not think would ever stoop to violent behavior. But you have to keep something in mind. Humans are the most dangerous animal on this planet. Animals kill for need. Humans kill for pleasure. There's nothing worse than that.
Joe, I feel like I'm in one of your episodes. Like the gravitas in your voice, I feel like I'm living one of your ID channel shows. So I love it.
I have noticed something over the years. You always hear people say, there is good in everyone. I disagree. There are no absolutes in human behavior. There are those among us who have no good in them at all, and they will set your grandchild on fire to make you watch until they put a bullet in your forehead. That's why they call them terrorists. People are absolutely incredibly dangerous. That's why wild animals run from us. They know where we are. Uh-oh, it's a human. We need to get the hell out of here. And they're right.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, I wonder if for all your years in law enforcement, and I have family members that are in law enforcement as well, I feel like your view on life is skewed slightly to the fact that you see the worst of human beings, and you may see the worst of a certain race. So you may develop tendencies of that would some people would consider racist because you're only seeing the worst of this one, whether it's culture.
That's true, but I understand something as well. That represents 2% of the world. 98% of the world is just fine. They go to work every day, they go home, they pet the dog, they say hello to the wife, they talk to the kids, they have dinner, they watch a little TV, and they go to bed, and they get up and do it all over again. But there's 2% of those people who don't do any of that. And the easy way to describe it is this. Put a sign next to your driveway, and the sign will say, "Do not block this driveway, please." 98% of the world won't park there because there's a sign. 2% will, because the rules don't apply to them. They are special, and they do what they want. And if you spend 100% of your time with the 2%, you begin to believe they represent society at large, and they do not. They represent that little small number of humans that you have to look out for. When I was a policeman, I never associated with policemen. We didn't have shift parties. I didn't go to the policeman's ball. Nobody knew if I was married or nothing, because I had other friends who did other things for a living. Because I wanted to know and be assured as my life proceeded of the existence of the 98%. So I'd go to parties with military people, engineer from Ford Aerospace, all kinds of different guys and girls. And my wife was a nurse in a city hospital. So I'd go to some medical parties and so on with doctors and nurses. And you arrange yourself in such a way as you spend your time around normal people. I spent enough time around abnormal people. And that was my work. And my work I left at work. So at the end of my career, when I was overwhelmed emotionally by it, I would come home every day and my wife would say, well, how was today? What'd you do today? Would I say to her, well, I looked at an 8-month-old baby that the new boyfriend beat to death with a baseball bat because it cries too much? No, I wouldn't tell her that. I'd say I was quiet, not much happened. But after a lifetime of it, you're about ready to explode. So when I was approached by television, they approached me. Not, I didn't approach them. My wife beat me up until I agreed to call them back, which took 3 days. But anyway, she's very good at it. She has a PhD in nagging from a good school. Anyway, I discovered it was therapeutic to sit in front of a camera and say things to the camera I've never said to my wife.
Wow.
And it was interesting. I went to a screen test in Denver. A production company was approached by the network saying, talk to this guy, see what you think of him. So I go up there. Guy says, I'll pay you $100 to come up here and talk to a camera for 15 minutes. Now I'm a policeman. I never had any money. I didn't care about money. I still don't, But I thought $100, that's fine. You bet. So I drive up there and I sat in front of this. I was amazed at the studio and lights and cables and cameras and people and sound equipment. I'm the new guy. Never seen any of this stuff. I'm looking all around. Wow, look at it. I wonder what that does. And he stood there, this guy, and I said, what do you want me to talk about? And he said, tell me about murder. Okay. So I did for 30 minutes. Whatever came into my head. And I stopped and I said, is that what you had in mind? And everybody's looking at me with their jaw on their chest. And I thought, this didn't go well. I said, right. Let me ask you again. Is that what you had in mind? And they said, oh, yeah. Oh, my God, yes. And it's been off and running ever since, all over the world.
That's so cool. And a question about that, because my wife and I were talking about this, because I'll sometimes pop into the living room when she's watching it. I've noticed, and I'm not sure if you were involved with this, the actor who plays Joe Kenda in the reenactments is a very, very handsome, debonair man. No disrespect to you, sir. You're quite handsome in your own right. But did you have any say in who your actor was going to be in these scenes? Because that guy, he looks like a movie star, and you're Joe Kenda. So did you have any say, like, hey, make sure you got a good-looking guy playing me?
No, I had nothing to do with that. The director there's a book in Hollywood, like an MLS book.
Yeah.
Has pictures of men and women front and side view of actors and members of the Screen Actors Guild. They asked my wife to send them a picture of me at 43 years of age. So I did that. I sent them a picture of me when I was 43. That guy took that picture and thumbed through that book and selected Carl Marino to play the part of me. Nobody in my family thinks he looks anything like me, and I don't think he does either. And I thought, I wonder why they picked that guy. I have no idea why they did that, and I had nothing to do with it. So he is that guy for the series Homicide.
Wow.
He has since moved on because he's aged out, of course. So now that I have a new show, and I'm looking at other people's cases and commenting on them, because I had run out of bullets, my own cases, I called it. I stopped it myself in season 9. I called the network and I said, "Hey, I'm out of bullets. What I have remaining are inappropriate for a television audience. There either is no story. We came, we saw, we arrested. That's referred to in the trade as a grounder. Guy, the shooter hits the ground ball to the shortstop. They throw him out at first. It's a paperwork exercise. He's gone to jail. Period. The end. The other cases I had were too disgusting for a general television audience, or they had a reprehensible victim. Always a concern in court when the jury wants to dig up the victim so they can kill him again. We don't want to present that kind of a case. Now, that person, being reprehensible or not, no one is entitled to play God, and we will work those cases just as hard as any other. Someone has taken a life, and that's against the rules. But in terms of entertainment value, it's just not there. So I said, well, we're done. Thanks for the money. I hung up. 15 minutes, the phone rings. It's the president of the company, and he says, Joe, we're like the Corleones. The only way out of this for you is death. We're coming up with a new series idea. And that's all right. So that's what we're doing now.
Wow. That's so cool. A lot of things become truisms because people say it enough times, and there could be data behind it. But, automatically, if you see a couple and the woman goes missing, the stat, 9 out of 10 times it's the husband. 99% of the time it's the husband. As a police officer, was that your automatic gut reaction too? Or is this just us because we're desensitized from watching true crime and fiction that, it's always the husband?
It's never always anybody. I would say to Mike, I taught a class at the police academy just for a day on new guys and girls, how not to screw up a crime scene. Don't walk in the blood, don't stand on the gun, that sort of thing. Very simple. And they're kids. They're in their early 20s. Some of them have never even been to a funeral, let alone seen a violent death. So I put up a slide of a 37-year-old white female, blonde, very pretty, with 6 gunshot wounds in the chest. She's on a city street. She's at a down angle, so she gravity bleeds. Human body contains around 8 pints of blood, and it creates a river of blood. When gravity takes over, there's no blood pressure. You just drain through the bullet holes. So she's laying, and down the sidewalk is like 6 or 8 feet of blood. Color photograph. Intake of breath in the audience. And I would say to them, so, what do you think? Did her husband of 10 years get tired of her buttering the toast on the wrong side and put those 6 bullets in her 10 ring? Or is the shooter someone who believes all blondes are she-devils from hell who need to be eliminated? Well, it could be either one or anything in between. We weren't here. That's why we're here now. We have to unravel this. Who is responsible and what is their motivation? Now, it is in fact true that in the United States, 3 to 5% of homicides committed are committed by strangers that have no idea who the victim is and kill because they like it, kill because the victim got in the way of a bullet meant for somebody else, on and on and on. However, you have a 95 to 97% chance of being murdered by someone you know, someone you have a relationship with. It could be financial. It could even be criminal. It could be romantic. It could be all sorts of things. So the first instinct at a crime scene, tell me about the victim. I don't care about anything else yet. Tell me about, who is this person? Who is this blonde girl laying here bleeding out on my sidewalk? Married? Homosexual? Use drugs? Have a secret life that nobody knows about? Where does she work? Where does she buy her groceries? Where does she buy her gas? Because somewhere in that circle, she encountered someone who has made her look like this. What do 6 gunshot wounds tell you? Overkill. 1 is generally enough in the center of mass. But 6? Somebody's pissed. Who would that be? Somebody that knows her. So those kinds of questions do come up. But it's certainly not always the husband. However, a husband becomes the guy she probably knows the best. And as we know, marriages can produce emotional trauma, which could result in somebody deciding it's just time for this to end. And I have a better idea than an attorney. I've got this gun. That's not good. But it's in those kinds of thoughts have to cross your mind, but you have to keep an open mind. You don't know. Let's see where the facts take us, and then we'll make our decision about what the theory of the case is. Policemen make a mistake when they establish a theory on the way to the crime scene and then beat up the facts to match their theory. No. There is no theory. The only thing you're sure of, this woman is 37 years old. She's got blonde hair. She's full of bullets. Who wanted to do that? Somebody. Who's the somebody? So when you begin an investigation, a murderer is a shadow in the night. You have to give him a first, middle, last name, and a date of birth. It is euphoric when you do. I had 387 homicides. I cleared 356 by arrest and conviction. I'm 31 unsolved. My clearance rate's 92%. It's a national record. It still stands. In 2024, the average clearance rate, U.S.-wide, is 53.4%. A little higher than that.
A little bit.
And so if I was a football team and I was 356 and 31, I'd be a dynasty. Or I'm just a dumb shit who doesn't know 31 people. Like, you can make numbers say they go on.
Yeah. You mentioned that 31 people, and I've seen enough movies where the grizzled old cop is up at night and can't sleep because he has these missing cases. You obviously know the number off the top of your head. Without getting into the psychosis of it, and the impact it has onto you, why do you think those 31 went unsolved? And I know obviously there are probably 31 different cases and differences are all abound, but why do you think those went unsolved, especially considering your hit rate on the other 300 plus?
That's a good question, because I don't know the answer to that. If I knew, they wouldn't be unsolved.
Okay.
There are a lot of times in those cases, 17 of those cases, I know who did it, I can't prove it. In a modern court, it's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's proof beyond any doubt. Juries don't like to make decisions. They want to be able to tell their friends, well, I found him guilty because, man, what else could I do? They had a ton of evidence, and it's always push it off. I didn't decide to kill him, execute him. I didn't decide to put him in prison forever. No, the facts did. I just was an innocent witness to it all. That's human nature. Nobody wants to take responsibility for anything, including that. So when you take it to court now, in the 31 cases, I'm down to 28. Advances in DNA have solved 3 of them after I retired. Okay, because DNA is a science and it evolves. When it began, I needed a microliter of your body fluid to identify you in 1987. In the modern day, touch your desk and I'll tell you who you are from the amino acid in your fingerprint that you left on the desk. It's a remarkable turn of events.
It sure is. And one of the things that's commonly heard in my living room when my wife is watching these shows is, going back to the, the spouses killing each other or partners killing each other. My wife always shouts this, and I'm sure you get this all the time. Why didn't they just get a divorce? Wouldn't that be easier than murder? So my question to you as a police officer investigating this, did you ever just ask, dude or ma'am, wouldn't it have been easier just to forget a lawyer? Like, has that ever come up in your conversations with these suspects?
Never.
Really?
And the thing that amuses me about the coverage of murder cases in real life, the press is consumed by the motive. Police are searching for a motive. No, they're not. They don't give a shit about a motive. We're in the who, what, where, when, and how business. The why question only matters if it leads me to who. Once I know who, I no longer care about why. And it is any other policeman worth his salt. The why doesn't make any difference. People's emotion overcomes their judgment, and they make terrible decisions. And they lie because that's what they've been doing since they were 4 years old. Parents unknowingly teach a kid to lie. They do. Let's say your kid is standing in front of the cookie jar in the kitchen. The lid's off the jar. Mom says, "Did you eat a cookie?" The kid says, "Well, I remember being in the kitchen, Mom, and I was standing next to the cookie jar, and I seem to recall the lid was off the jar. And there could have been a moment when I had a cookie in my hand. But take a bite out of it? Oh, not me, Mom. Not me. I didn't take a cookie." Now, Mom knows better, right? But Mom thinks it's unimportant. Well, all right. What's that tell the kid? Lying works.
Yeah.
Lying works. Now he's 40 years old. He's sitting in an interrogation room with me, and he's telling me the same story. Take a bite of the cookie? No, I didn't do that. Really? Really? And so it's pathetic. It is pathetic when people lie. People are enormously predictable, and nobody thinks that. Everybody believes they're a genius. Everybody believes they're Professor Moriarty. But in reality, they're the creature from the Black Lagoon. They're operating on pure hate or pure jealousy or pure rage, and they don't even remember what they did, let alone how they did it. But they're going to come up with a story that makes them appear to be as innocent as the driven snow. And it never works. And if I didn't have a case, you wouldn't be sitting there in the first place. Confessions are extremely rare. They are. People might make an incriminating statement once in a while, something you could make them eat, and some lie that they told you during the interrogation. But for the most part, it doesn't matter what they say, because I can already prove it's them. I want to give them the opportunity to come forward and tell me the truth, which I never, ever heard. The truth is very elusive. When you're standing on somebody's tail and they don't like it, all they want to do is lie their ass off, because that's all they know how to do. And it's interesting. I mean, you tell somebody, I would do this in an interrogation and say, well, why don't you tell me what happened? And he's got a story that he's been thinking up for 8 or 10 days, knowing you're finally going to be arresting him. So he goes through his spiel. I said this to a guy once. I said, so that's what happened. Yes. And you're sure about that? Yes. You didn't leave anything out? No, I didn't leave anything out. Okay. I said, let me tell you something. You know what I do all day? I listen to stories. People tell me reasons for me to believe they're innocent. That's what I do. Sometimes 12 hours a day. And I got to be honest with you. I feel sorry for you. You've had, 8, 10 days to think this up? And this is the best you can do. This has got to be, if it's not the worst story I ever heard, it's in the top 5. Maybe you ought to rethink this. What do you think? And it gets to that point.
Joe, you seem to be good with stats. How many confessions did you get during your career? The number sounds like it must be low, that you actually got confessions in the room.
8.
8. Wow. Yeah. Why do you think those 8 confessed?
Because I rattled their cage. I rattled it enough to where they got really frightened. I'll give you an example. Guy kills his girlfriend. She's a missing person. He reports her as missing. She's missing for 4 months. We can't find her. Colorado's a big place. We know he did something to this girl because we can feel it in our bones. but we don't have a body. He even helps the mother tack up pictures of her on trees and so on. My daughter's missing, please call me. He appears on press coverage of the missing girl, pleading for the person responsible to return her to her loving mother. Finally, a woman walking a dog finds what's left of her 4 months down the road, which isn't much, not enough for us to gain a whole lot of information for the remains. But I bring him in time and time again, and he tells me his story, and his story is this. He says that he and his girlfriend, this missing girl, who is now no longer missing, she wanted to go dancing at the club they frequent. He said, I can't do it tonight. I have to work early tomorrow. I can't. They get in an argument about it. He finally drives her over there in his car. You want to go dancing? Go right ahead. He sits there in the car for a moment or so, watches her walk in a club, and he says that's the last time he's ever seen her. Okay, so what'd you do after that? Well, I went toward my house. I stopped in a 7-Eleven. Which one? And he tells me. And I stood in line because there were people in there. Bought a pack of cigarettes. And then what? Well, then I went home. I went to bed because I had to go to work early in the morning. When I woke up, she wasn't there, and I haven't seen her since. All right. So let me tell you a story, Bob. I sent 3 of my detectives to make that trip that you've told me about for months. They went to the club. They sat in front of the club and simulated someone walking slowly from their car to the door and inside. Then they left. They went to this. It was the same day of week, same time of day. They went to that 7-Eleven. They simulated standing in line if there wasn't one, or stood in line when there was. And they bought a pack of cigarettes. And they drove to your apartment, parked, locked the car, and walked up the staircase to your front door. How long do you think it took them to do that? Well, I don't know. I said, well, it took them 17 minutes. According to your timeline you've been describing to me, it took you 1 hour and 10 minutes to do that. And I sat on the edge of the table. I went around the table, sat on the edge, and I got real close to him in his personal space, which is part of the deal. And I looked him in the eye and I said, you know, that's odd, isn't it? Don't you think that's odd? And he is about ready to fall apart. He's sweating. He's nervous. He's looking at the door, bouncing both knees on the floor, his feet, you know. He is absolutely trapped. And I said, you know, you don't have to feel like this. Sometimes the truth will set you free.
You really said that to him? I thought that's like a movie line. You said that to him?
I said that to him. And he said, I didn't mean to hurt her. Okay, you've gone that far. Tell me the rest. Well, we stopped on the way, and where you found her, which was in a creek bed, some distance from the bar. She tried to punch him. He punched her back. She went over the edge of this ravine, hit her head on a piece of concrete, and he knew she was dead. And he got back in his car and started inventing a story. Yeah, it happens, but it's rare. It's very rare. And he was a guy who was not a criminal. He'd never been arrested in his life. Never did anything wrong. Never got a parking ticket. He moves up in the world when he kills somebody. So yeah, it's unfortunate. But it's the lies is all you deal with all the time.
And speaking of lies, you know, we know of the cliched character, whether it's in books, movies, television, about the human lie detector, like the person who could tell someone's lying. I'm assuming you probably don't want to call yourself a human lie detector, but I'm pretty sure your radar at detecting lies must have been pretty good to have the hit rate that you had.
It's real good. Yeah. Yeah, I can judge people like a psychiatrist in less than 30 seconds. You know, who are you? I picture people covered in buttons. Let's push this button and see what it does. Oh, we get a reaction. Did I touch a nerve?
Do you
You know,
turn
you
that
could,
off in real life, Joe? Like, are you able, like, when you go, like, hang out with your friends or your
sure.
family, you do? Okay.
My son was 12 years old. He said, "It's not fair." We got in an argument about it. He wanted a stereo, and his buddies had a stereo because his parents were divorced, and they play one against the other. The kid does. Well, Dad would buy it for me. Not you, Mom, because you're a bitch. But my father would buy it. And that's the game. I understand that very well. And he says, "It's not fair." I said, "What's not fair?" "Well, you and Mom were married." "Yeah, we are." "And you always know when I'm lying." I said, "I do." Yeah, you're not a very good liar either, Dan. I got to tell you, I'm sorry. It's true. And he was just almost in tears. I said, "You know what you should do? You should go live with your friend. He knows how to play the game with people. Because here it doesn't work."
Wow.
The first thing I said to you, Dan, remember when you said you needed a new stereo, I said, "What did your mother say?"
Well played.
Oh, she said no. I said, "Well, then what are you asking me for?"
Oh, that's great.
I've been married to my wife for 56 years. We met in high school. We've known each other all our lives.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something funny. It really is funny, I think. When the network decided to hire me, it was an interesting moment because I went back to talk to them at their headquarters, and there were 7 people in the room, a woman who was the chief of programming development, an executive producer who still is my executive producer, and 5 lawyers, all of them work for them. Hires me. I didn't have anybody with me. I said, "What do you want?" So this girl stands up, young girl, and very confrontively says, "My name is so-and-so, and I'm an attorney." Like I'm supposed to drop dead or something, And I looked at her, I said, "Oh, your mother doesn't know, does she?" She turned absolutely beat red and sat back down. The woman that was sitting there, this program manager, put her hand over her face because she was laughing. And I said, I can make this meeting short because I have other things to do. So here's the deal. You want to know what murder's like? Come with me and I'll show you. You want some Hollywood crap that you guys been making for 30 years? You're talking to the wrong guy. Now, if you excuse me, I promised my wife I'd take her to lunch. So I'll see you. And I got to walk down. I didn't make it to the elevator.
Ha.
Could you come back in here? Why? I want to talk to you some more. So anyway, that's all that happened. But it was just interesting. So once they decide, all right, we're going to do this. Okay. They sent a limousine to my house in Colorado to take us to the airport to fly to the first filming. Because I put it in my contract that my wife travels at their expense at her discretion. She goes if she wants. She doesn't go if she doesn't feel like it. They pay for it. First class air, limo, 5-star hotel, the whole deal. No one else does that, by the way. It was kind of disappointing, but it's true. So we're standing there, and here's this guy, jumps out of this thing. He's wearing a suit. He opens the left rear door, looks at my wife, and he says, "Madam." And she stood there. And I said, "Kathy, what? You're a madam. Get in." Well, she knows she's madam now. So that's that. There's no problem.
Very classy. Very classy. All right, Joe, a couple of random things I want to end with here is, one, as a Gen Xer, I grew up in a world of serial killers. There were almost a dime a dozen in the 70s and 80s. And now we've kind of flipped. Now we have more mass shootings than I remember when I was a little kid. But there's no serial killers that we know of. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but it just doesn't seem like we have the Ted Bundys of the world anymore. John Wayne Gacy's, any of those people. Why? Why are there? And not that it's a bad thing. I'm not complaining.
We do, and we still uncover them occasionally. Okay, the mass shooter thing that's happening is a couple of reasons. One, this country has a love affair with guns that they've never gotten over. How did this country begin? Armed revolution.
Yeah.
Colonists stopped bringing their muskets to church in the 1830s when handguns became more reliable. This thing is cultural. It's never going to go away. There is a building full of gun laws that don't mean very much at all, as long as there is opposition to any real honest attempt of limiting firearms. And even if there were, even if we suddenly come up with this desire that maybe it's time, it's entirely too late. There are more guns in this country than our people.
Yeah. You know, I have this argument all the time with folks in my family I mentioned that are in law enforcement, and they're conservative. And as you could tell, Joe, I'm your typical liberal New Yorker. But I always say to them, I get your conservative politics, but as someone who is on the streets, protecting the community and people shooting at you and all this stuff going haywire when you're a police officer, why would you be so pro Second Amendment? Like if I was a cop, Joe, I'd be like, I'd like a world with less guns. Might make my life a little easier. What is your perspective on the Second Amendment as a police officer? And without getting into your politics, unless you want to, like, how do you square that away?
I never discuss politics or religion because it tends to bring out the worst in people. But guns and the Second Amendment has been broadly interpreted by both sides of that equation. And the original theory of the Second Amendment was to protect the public from a king. That you would be armed and therefore a king could not announce he's in charge of you because you have weapons and they're the same as the weapons his army has. That's the basic theory behind it. It was
the whole militia thing and everything, yeah.
Yeah, it was all about George III. It was really all about George III. So it's been long gone for a very long time. So we now have a situation where we have people in the business of manufacturing and selling firearms of every description. And by law, there is no weapon you are restricted from owning except a nuclear weapon. If you want an M1 Abrams tank with a working main cannon, a 7.62 machine gun, and a 50 cal mount on the top of the turret, come up with about $12 million, go to General Motors and buy one. You need an ATF stamp that'll cost you $150 that says you are not a criminal and you have no criminal history, and it's called an exotic weapons permit. And now you go steaming out of General Motors in your M1 Abrams, ready to take on the world or whatever. And there are people that do that. Want a jet fighter? No problem. You just can't have an ejection seat. It's interesting. It's like you can't save your life. You've got to go down with a ship and not run into an apartment building. So you can't arm the ejection seat. But other than that, you can own one if you have enough money. But the other issue in this country, which should be obvious to everyone, how many people live here? Well, we say 335 million. Is that accurate? No. We have no idea who lives here. We don't. We're not very good at counting noses. But what we are good at is not paying for things because we don't like that. We all hate taxes. Ooh, no. So what about the mental health system? It collapsed 30 years ago. It collapsed because they won't fund it. It's expensive. If you have a broken leg, you're going to heal in 8 weeks. How long are you going to be nuts? Nobody knows the answer to that. All right? So what do we do with these people? We make them homeless. The police pick them up when they're doing something bizarre. They take them for a 24-hour or 48-hour mental health hold. They fill them full of lithium and level them out a little bit, give them a supply of drugs, and turn them loose. What do? They sell it on the street, and 3 weeks later, they're back in the hospital again, getting their free supply of narcotics. It's how it works. It's unfortunate. It's sad. So now we have this group of crazy people wearing a football helmet, pushing a shopping cart, and announcing they're Moses in a society where a gun couldn't be easier to obtain, legally or illegally. That would be a bad mix. That's the problem with democracy. It's so messy. People get killed, all kinds of bad things happen.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Joe. We didn't get too political. I know you don't like politics. So let's talk about books, because from TV star now to author, why this move?
Well, why not? You know, my wife, again, my wife is at fault here.
Okay.
My wife is Irish, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, with a temper like a chainsaw. I don't understand her, but I'm working on it. Anyway, she told me I ought to write a book. Yeah, right. I'm going to write a book. Yeah, you're going to write a book. All for years, she said that. So finally I said, let me try it. So I wrote a book like 5 or 6 times. I threw it away. And I wrote it the 7th time, and I said, yeah, that's pretty good. So I went to an agent, and the agent pushed it, and somebody amazingly bought it. And amazing after that, people bought it too. And I became a bestseller on the New York Times list. I was like, what? But I write from a perspective of reality. I find it disappointing when I don't read. I read a lot, but I don't read murder mystery because I did it for a living. But when I do skim through one, you find a weapon that didn't exist at the time the book is set in. You find a weapon that's never existed. Can you at least do a little research here, pal?
Right.
To write this book? What kind of gun is that? Has never heard of it because there's never been one. So there's so many holes in those stories because they have no sense of reality. Well, I did this for a living, and I know what reality is, and so I write from that perspective. If you want somebody to draw you a picture by writing about it, then you should select someone who knows how to draw.
I love that. And so they're fictionalized stories with you as the main character, right? Is that what
That's correct. They're fictionalized in terms of I changed all the names.
Okay.
To protect the guilty. It's a mishmash of my own experiences is what it is.
And the latest book is First Do No Harm. Give us a quick little thumbnail for folks as we wrap this up. What's this one about?
People believe fentanyl is a new problem. It's not. It's been around since the 1960s. It's a synthetic intravenous anesthetic. It is 100 times more powerful than morphine and 50 times more powerful than heroin. When properly administered by an anesthesiologist, patients have better outcomes. They wake up sooner. They have less after effect of the drug, but it has to be microscopically measured. The AMA admits that 2.2% of anesthesiologists in the United States are addicted to narcotics. Where'd they come up with that number? They did because it's small. They have no idea who's addicted to narcotics. They selected 2.2% because it sounds better than their reality. All right? So my book is about an anesthesiologist who is blessed with a certain moral flexibility and decides that he is an addict, further decides he's frightened that the hospital might find out that he's tapping their supply and replacing it with saline, which is how it's done in a hospital. Fentanyl is in a liquid form in hospital. So he decides to start making it. Then he interferes with a Mexican cartel. Now, all the police are going to do is arrest you. The Mexican cartel is going to kill you and your bloodline. And there's the story.
Wow. You got me hooked. His name is Lieutenant Joe Kenda. Joe, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for humoring me with some of these random questions that I have, but the book sounds amazing. I'll continue watching your TV shows accidentally with my wife.
As you pass through the living room.
As I pass through the living room, yeah. So thank you again, Joe. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And that'll do it for this episode of Good Listen. If you'd like, you can connect with me on X, LinkedIn, or Instagram at Joe Pardavila or TikTok at jpardavila. If you want to shoot me a note and tell me your story, email me, joepardavila@protonmail.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube, please hit that thumbs up button. It's a small gesture, but it really helps the channel. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, I would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I will see you next time. Adios.